The all-new W206 Mercedes-Benz C-Class is finally here in Malaysia. This replaces the super popular W205, and at the same time it has to go against the latest G20 BMW 3 Series, widely regarded as the best 3 Series in quite a long time. So here we have the whole range, the base C200 Avantgarde, as well as the top of the range C300 AMG line. So let's find out once and for all if it's any good. Is it a big upgrade over the W205, and at the same time, is it a better buy compared to the 3 Series? Let's find out all that and more in this video. This review is brought to you by Petronas Premax 97 with Pro Race, power to move beyond. The new W206 has large shoes to fill because the previous generation W205 was a brand-defining model. Mercedes-Benz has always been a popular brand here in Malaysia, but traditionally has appealed to the slightly older audience. The W205 changed all that single-handedly. With its sleek looks and sporty driving, it made driving a C-Class cool and fashionable again, even for those under 40. Well, I should know, I've had two myself, an original C300 sedan as well as a facelift C200 coupe. Now let's talk about the pricing, because this W206 has had quite a significant price bump. The base C200 Avantgarde now goes for just under 290,000 ringgit, while the C300 AMG line goes for 330,000. Compared to the W205, that is up to 40,000 ringgit more expensive, and at the same time, that makes it around 50,000 ringgit more than the 3 Series as well. This C200, in fact, is about the same price as a BMW 330i. But to be honest, even with the newly elevated pricing levels, I think you do get what you pay for with the new C-Class. Here we have the two very distinct different faces of the C-Class. The C200 here wears the baseline avant-garde look, while the C300 wears the much sportier AMG line face. The differences are way more than before. The entire bumpers are different, and even the grille shapes are different between the two. The C200 here has a smaller upswept grille, while the C300 here has a much larger, much wider downward sloping grille. The grille inserts are different as well. The C200 has mostly vertical lines, while the C300 is quite literally star-studded. Now, the first time I saw it, I would be honest, I thought Mercedes has gone way over the top this time, but here in the flesh, I think they look absolutely gorgeous. I am in love with this new look. Moving further down, the bumper inserts are distinct between the two as well. The C200 has a much more rounded, much more friendly face, while the C300 has a much lower, much sportier, much more aggressive lower apron. Between the two, I do think the AMG line has a slightly more pouty face, if that's a thing, while this is a friendlier, more elegant look. But either way, both of them, I think, look better than the equivalent BMW 3 Series. What do you think? Do you agree with me or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. But there's something I'm really not happy about at the front here. Going against the recent Mercedes-Benz Malaysia traditions, both models get the exact same headlights, the lower level LED high performance headlights. With previous C-Classes and even the E-Class and GLC, the high-end version always gets the top-of-the-line model, be it multi-beam or, in this case of the C-Class, digital lights. But yeah, we're not getting that for Malaysia at all. In terms of functions, it's not a big loss because this still has automatic high beam, but you do miss out on adaptive matrix high beam, of course. The bigger loss is in terms of looks, because now even the C300 gets the ugly looking reflector high beams, which does not look right with me. So all the fancy international photos and videos that Mercedes uses to market this car, we're not getting the same look here in Malaysia. I think that is an outright shame. But other than that, I think Mercedes-Benz Malaysia has nailed the specifications of the C-Class, at least on the outside. Both wheel options look really good, 18s on the C200 and multi-spoke 19s on the C300. I'm especially happy that we're not getting those silly looking aero wheels on the A200 and the E300. The proper multi-spokes here look top class. There's a nice balance to both wheel options too. The C200 may be smaller, but they do look really good, not cheap at all, while the C300 look magnificent. Take the car as a whole, and I think this is a gorgeous looking sedan. The side here is where I think the W206 has changed the most compared to the W205. The lines on the side and all the surfacing has been made a lot simpler over here, and I think it really works. This is now a much better proportioned sedan in my books compared to the stubby rear-ended W205. Mercedes-Benz has done this by stretching the whole car out a fair bit. This is now longer overall. At the same time, it's also wider, slightly lower, and the wheelbase is a bit longer as well. At over 4.7 meters long, this is hardly a compact car anymore. But even then, compared to the latest 3 Series, these two are very close together in terms of overall size. This is slightly bigger, but not by much. At the same time, this still looks a lot smaller, a lot more athletic than a BMW 5 Series or a Mercedes-Benz E-Class. That's a good thing. Around the back, the C-Class does have that mini S-Class look to it, especially with this pointy and slim taillights. This two-piece and horizontal light arrangement does make it look a fair bit wider than the W205 with its vertical taillights, but as a whole, I do think Mercedes-Benz has lost a little bit of the distinctiveness of the rear end of the C-Class over here. What has not changed, however, is Mercedes' appetite to fit these really off-putting fake tailpipe finishes in the back of their cars. And in fact, the C200 only has a single tailpipe behind the bumper pointing down. Mercedes-Benz, if you are unwilling to have exposed tailpipes on the back of your cars, perhaps it's time to design them without it. Volvo has done it and the cars look good. Why can't you? The one department that the previous generation W205 really moved the game forward was the dashboard. It was so far ahead of the game that when the G23 series finally came about 5 years later, it merely caught up to the C-Class, not surpass it. In my books, I still think the W205 dashboard is ahead of the G20 in terms of looks and feel. And then we have this, the W206 dashboard. Like before, this is clearly the best interior in the business right now. There is a lot to like in this interior. From the top, there's these gorgeous looking turbine style aircon vents, there's the huge portrait style big screen, and this waterfall design. It just looks and feels like a nice place to be in, this W206. There's a lot of nice details as well. The whole top half is covered in this new Napa look Artico leather. It's still the same old Artico leather, meaning artificial leather, but it's been given a much nicer sheen to it. The grain is much smoother, it looks a lot more premium. It looks like the real deal Napa leather even. And then there's the ambient lighting, where Mercedes-Benz has had a huge lead in this department. The W206 takes it to a whole different level. There's lighting within the aircon vents, there's lighting behind the screen, there's more pipings within the waterfall and the door cards. At night, this is mesmerizing. But that's not to say that the interior is perfect, because it's actually far from it. I have to say, in terms of perceived build quality, this car does feel like it has taken a significant step down compared to the W205. Now, obviously, I'm very familiar with the 205, having lived with it for the past 6 years, and jumping from that into this, there is a stark difference in terms of the plastic quality over here. Easiest to see is this whole piece down here. In the 205, that's all soft touch, but over here, it's all hard and scratchy plastic at that. The biggest offender is this small piece over here. Just listen to it. It's just so hollow, so creaky, has no place in a modern Mercedes-Benz, I think. Beyond that, there are quite a few clear cost-cutting measures to be seen elsewhere as well. This overhead panel over here is, for one, missing the sunglass holder from before, but if you just push it, it moves about in a low quality manner. It's now come to a point where I would now rank the G20 BMW as having a better quality interior compared to the C-Class. For a Mercedes-Benz, that is a huge letdown. But disappointing quality aside, let's move on to the actual features of this interior, starting with this massive center screen over here. This is the second generation MBUX, which is the same one used in the latest S-Class. This is a big shift forward for Mercedes-Benz, which has used traditionally widescreen displays to now a portrait big screen like this. But Mercedes-Benz has really used the extra real estate in a clever manner. At the bottom here is your aircon controls. Now, I know having aircon controls within the screen is never an ideal thing, but compared to, say, a Volvo where you have to press a button to then access the aircon controls, here it's always there. Even when you off the screen like this, the aircon controls are still there, so it's not so bad. The rest of the screen is quite cleverly used as well. It's split into three, so aircon controls at the bottom. In the middle here, all your major controls, mostly your audio and whatnot settings. And at the top is your map. So when you're driving, at a quick glance, you get full access to all the necessary details. The map here might just be the best onboard navigation system we have in Malaysia yet. Let's just do a quick search for KLCC. It's not the fastest system, it's not like your smartphones, but once everything is loaded, it does look really good. As you can see over here, it has 3D models of all major buildings, and once you move the map around, it's actually quite fast, quite snappy, not far off an iPad, I would think. The map system also has a live traffic information for the first time for Mercedes-Benz here in Malaysia. So if you were to use the onboard navigation, it will actually give you an accurate ETA based on the actual live traffic information that it has. Of course, this is using Here Maps. It's not quite as widely used as Google Maps or Waze, so yeah, it might use certain roads that are not ideal, but still, for once you can actually use your onboard navigation, and there are quite a few perks if you use that as well. Number one, you can display the map within your instrument cluster over here with a small swipe, and the map appears there. It does look really good, and if you so want, you can just have it on full screen as well. But the coolest part is the AR, or augmented reality function of this navigation. Whenever you're reaching an intersection, this car will show a live feed of the road ahead with projections of where you're supposed to turn. I think it looks really good, although it's a little bit distracting, I must say. This uses a camera on the top over here, much like a dash cam, even though that's all it's used for. It doesn't actually work as a dash cam. That's a bit of a shame as well, I think. That could easily be used as an onboard dash cam, but yeah, it's not done. But of course, most users will still prefer to use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and here the implementation is fantastic as well. It follows the general MBUX display over here as well, your audio controls in the middle, your map at the top. It looks really good, really sharp as well. Better yet, this is wireless CarPlay for the first time for Mercedes-Benz. And unlike BMW, you don't have to pay extra for it. This comes standard with the car. On a 300,000 ringgit vehicle, it better be standard. With the BMW, it's almost like you spending, whatever the amount of money for a business class airline ticket and then being charged for water. Doesn't make sense, does it? One fair warning, however, well, this car does have a wireless charging pad for your smartphone for a completely wireless experience. Using CarPlay wirelessly does drain a lot of your battery. So even while you leave your phone on the wireless charger as you drive along, after an hour, you might find your phone charge to not have changed much from the beginning, because projecting this just uses up so much energy from the battery in the first place. Now let's move on to equipment, where the C-Class is generally quite highly spec'd. The top of the dashboard is fully covered in nice quality leather, and that's even on the base C200, again surprising by Mercedes-Benz Malaysia standards. In fact, there's not much real big changes between the C200 and the C300. The only noticeable differences is the inclusion of a panoramic sunroof on the top model, as well as the AR functions for the screen over here. There is also a lack of a 360-degree camera on the C200, but yeah, not such a big loss for quite an easy car to park like this. One thing that is sorely lacking on the local C300 is the Burmester premium audio system. This is again something we've come accustomed to in top-end Mercedes-Benz, and is just such a pity to have it lacking on the C300 over here. The base model speakers don't really sound all that bad, but I would much appreciate the better looking, fancier Burmester speaker grills for the C300. At the same time, this car does have an electric steering adjustment for both models. That is something that's sorely lacking in all BMW 3 Series sold here in Malaysia. One thing that has not changed, however, is the cramped footwell for the C-Class. So on the left side, there is still no proper footrest for the driver, so for long distance journeys, you might find yourself getting a little bit more tired than you should. But that's enough for the front of the dashboard. Let's move on to the rear seats. A little known fact is that the BMW 3 Series over the past few generations have had better rear seats compared to the C-Class. This is especially noticeable with the last generation W205 version, where the rear seats were a little bit cramped and the base was a bit too short. So yeah, long journeys, not quite the car's best feature. All of that have been fixed with this W206. This car's longer wheelbase means that there's much more space in the back here. As you can see, I can just properly sit in the back with no issues whatsoever. Even if you're especially tall, much taller than me, I'm only 167 centimeters tall, you'll have zero issues in terms of legroom and headroom as well. This in fact is the C300 with the panoramic sunroof that eats up into headroom a little bit. The C200 will have a much better headroom level. Onto the seats, it has been made much more comfortable than before. The seat base or the seat squab has been raised up slightly and elongated a little bit, giving you much better thigh support for longer journeys. And the backrest is now angled slightly more reclined. So yeah, this is a fantastic place to be in, whether you're children or an adult sitting back here for long few hours drive. In terms of amenities, it's quite surprising. You do get the basic set of rear aircon vents, but no controls like you do in previous versions of the C-Class or even the 3 Series. And surprisingly, there's not one single USB charging port in the back here. What you do get is a full array of sun blinds, manual ones on the side window and a powered one for the rear window. And speaking of the door cards, even in the back here, the top half is covered in Nepal look leather, so that is really a nice touch. As for the boot, the good news is both models get power boot as standard, even the C200, which is surprising for Mercedes-Benz Malaysia. One thing we do miss out on, however, is the contactless opening feature, as in you can't just kick to open the boot. However, I've been told that the CKD versions will likely have this feature, so yeah, that's something to look forward to there. As for the boot itself, the W206 has exactly the same boot space as before at 455 litres. That also makes it a tiny bit smaller than the 3 Series, but you know, in use, this is a wide and long cargo space. Should be more than enough for regular use. One thing I don't like, however, is the move from having top-mounted hooks to these tiny ones on the side. I think the old version was much more useful. What is a good addition, however, is this quick release function to fold the rear seats down. That makes it so much easier to load things in, but at the same time there is still a small step on the boot floor, so you can't just slide long things in like say IKEA tables or whatever. But speaking of flat pack goods, there is still this, my absolute favorite, a flat pack basket fitted under the boot floor. This is genius. Now let's go drive this thing. Alright, as usual, we will start with the engines first. The W206 C-Class gets Mercedes' very latest engines, the RM254 series. In other markets, this was originally introduced in the E-Class facelift, but in Malaysia we are always half a step behind, but at least we are getting it here on the latest C-Class. So this C200 gets a brand new 1.5 litre 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine with a 48 volt mild hybrid system. This makes 204 PS and 300 Newton meters of torque. That is an exact match to the outgoing C200's 2-litre turbo, but at the same time it's also a big upgrade from the original facelift's 1.5 litre turbocharged 48 volt mild hybrid system from before. So if that is your baseline, this represents a big performance upgrade despite having the same 1.5 litre engine capacity. In fact, I see no noticeable difference between this and the outgoing 2-litre version. So yeah, you do pay a little bit less in terms of road tax per year, but you get the same amount of performance. So yeah, win-win right there. The one I'm driving right now, however, is the more expensive C300. This gets a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged, again with a 48 volt mild hybrid system, and this makes 258 PS and 400 Newton meters of torque. That is 30 Newton meters more compared to the outgoing C300. This is obviously quite a bit faster, 0 to 100 taking 6 seconds flat, but as is usual, numbers only tell half the story. Compared to the previous versions of the C-Class, this does feel like a big step up in terms of performance, especially in terms of low speed initial acceleration. That has mostly to do with the ISG, the integrated starter generator, that's part of the mild hybrid system. So with this, it can deliver up to 20 PS and 200 Newton meters extra on top of what the engine is producing. So that's where you get the initial surge of performance. But that is mostly felt in initial accelerations. When you are well above, say, 80, 90, 100 kilometers per hour, you don't really feel that extra electric performance as much. So while this is an upgrade over the previous generation C-Classes, it doesn't feel quite as quick as the 330i especially. That is still far more explosive out on the road. Most of the difference comes from BMW's ZF 8-speed transmission. Now, the C-Class now runs the latest version of Mercedes' own 9G Tronic transmission, and is the best it has ever been. It's buttery smooth when going through the gears, and even when you're hustling it a little bit, it shifts very fast. The response is much better than before. But it's still lacking that little bit of that immediate surge compared to BMW. So overall, in terms of performance, engine and transmission, it's quite a big step forward, but it's a little bit behind the 3 Series. But the difference is now really slim. Now on to fuel economy. I've measured both these cars, the C300 and the C200, over my regular test cycles, and I average around 8.5 litres per 100 kilometers on the C200 and around 8 litres per 100 kilometers with the C200. Compared to the older version, that's about 10-15% better, which is just about okay, I guess. But the bigger improvements are in refinement, because these engines are far smoother, far more refined than the old versions. The fuel economy upgrades are most welcome too, of course. Now it's settled, you can enjoy the ultimate convenience and safety. Pay for petrol from inside your own car. Just pay, pump and go. Now available at all Petronas stations nationwide. And while you're at the station, enjoy makan at Mesra. Fresh and well-balanced premium food at affordable prices, available at your convenience. Petronas, your seamless on-the-go retail partner. But the biggest improvement for the W206 is in terms of ride quality. The suspension just feels superb. The W205, as good as the car was, it was lacking in terms of suspension finesse. It was comfortable for the most part, but on rough Malaysian roads, it just felt a little bit under-damped. especially if it's measured against the G20 BMW 3 Series that has a perfect balance of ride quality and handling, especially in 320i standard suspension form. But thankfully that has been completely addressed with the W206. Mercedes has gone to town with this car with the suspension system. We are still unfortunately getting the base suspension setup, called very fancily the agility control suspension with selective damping, but that is still in effect a passive damper setup. So there's no way to choose between comfort and sport or whatever in between, but the net effect is still a fantastically comfortable car, much more so than the previous generation. This is a welcome return to form for Mercedes-Benz, which has long been chasing that BMW 3 Series handling crown, and with the W205 perhaps has taken it a little bit too far. With this 206, it has finally come back down to earth and just saying, you know what, we can be our own car. We don't have to make a 3 Series clone. This car's body control is now supremely good. It floats over bumps like nothing else I've seen on this class of car. This even has that slightly floaty ride comfort feel that you'd get in mostly air-sprung suspension system. To do that with a normal spring and dampers is quite a big achievement, in a good way of course. This is much more comfortable than before, and I think it's more comfortable than the 3 Series as well. The C200 and the 320i, they are very close in terms of ride comfort, but I think the C200 edges it a little bit. But when we're talking about the C300 compared to the 330i with its standard sport suspension, the difference is just night and day. This is 1,000 times, 5,000 times more comfortable than the 330i. In fact, this comes close to E-Class levels of comfort, which I think is amazing. Welcome back to form, Mercedes-Benz. We've missed you. Between the two cars, the C200 and the C300, there is a slight difference in terms of ride quality, and it's not because of the different wheel configuration. It's because of the standard fit tires. While the C200 comes with run flat tires as expected for a modern Mercedes-Benz, the C300 comes with regular tires with a tire fit tire repair kit in the boot. That makes it actually surprisingly the more comfortable choice. This C300, despite having bigger wheels with thinner tires on the outside, is actually the more comfortable of the two. Now, we're not talking massive amounts of differences over here, but especially at low speed over sharp bumps, you definitely feel it more in the C200 over the C300 over here. Plus, having changed a full set of 19-inch run flat tires in my old C300, well over 5 grand per set, yeah, that was not fun at all. You may think people who are spending, well, north of 300,000 ringgit on a car may not bother so much in terms of tire costs, but you know what? Money is money, man. Doesn't matter how much you have, money is money. This newfound sense of comfort, however, has not come at the expense of agility, because this car may be relatively softly sprung compared to a BMW 3 Series, but its agility is still mostly there. Body control is still extremely good for a car of this size and this weight, and even though you do get quite a fair bit more body roll than a comparable BMW 3 Series, I think you can hustle this car as fast as a 3 Series. I still think you'll get a little bit more enjoyment with the BMW, of course, that's what it's built for, but the difference really is not as big as you may think, especially not when you consider how much more comfortable this car is. So overall, in terms of ride and handling, this is now a massive leap forward over the previous generation, and in my personal opinion, this is the preferable choice in the class over the BMW 3 Series. Now let's talk about Refinement, where again the C-Class shines. Through normal driving, it is almost pin drop silent over here in the C-Class. There's a little bit of a tire roar coming in, especially on the C200, surprisingly, again because of the run flat tires. But on the C300, it's much more silent than the previous version. However, in terms of Wind noise, I don't think there's a big enough improvement in that sense. Driving this car up to 110-120 kilometers per hour, it is nice and serene. But beyond that, as soon as you touch 130, 140, you get a lot of wind buffeting going into this car. That does not feel as premium as a C-Class should be. A 3 Series going the same speeds will be much more comfortable in terms of sound insulation, I think. One last thing on Refinement is the engine noise. Now, Mercedes has, I guess, worked really hard on making its engines sound as smooth as BMW, and it's done so by adding some synthetic engine sounds through the speakers. Especially on the C300, it has fitted its so-called sport exhaust system, and you can feel this extra bassy drone coming in through the speakers, especially even at low revs. At parking speeds, it can be a little bit annoying, especially if you have your audio off, like I always do when I'm reviewing cars. But yeah, it's always there in the background, can be a little bit off-putting. But when you're accelerating hard, however, it's actually quite a nice tune. Not quite as natural sounding as BMW's 4-cylinder engines, but yeah, again, it's getting close. So all the drawbacks of the C-Classes from before, the W205, this has improved dramatically. And all the deficits to the 3 Series, it has either surpassed it or at least closed the gap up. This is a huge generational leap forward, I think, for the C-Class. But I do have to mention one thing, which is active safety systems. This car does come with autonomous emergency braking as well as a blind spot monitor and active lane keep assist. But it does not have adaptive cruise control. Mercedes-Benz, for whatever reason, is still trying to reserve all those features for its ultra high-end models. The cheapest Mercedes-Benz you can buy in Malaysia with full features is a 400,000 ringgit E300. Anything below just gets AEB. Now, in this sense, you can't really blame Mercedes-Benz Malaysia on its own because the rest of its premium competition is doing the same things. BMW had just added on AEB last year. There's that. Audi does not have AEB, for $500,000 car. That is beyond ridiculous. So within the premium segment, Mercedes-Benz is doing okay. It's just that I think it's time to accept the fact that the Malaysian market is quite unique. It's not like your other markets that you are used to. Here, our humble Pro2 Myvi gets full level 2 semi-autonomous driving. For a car of this price, 300,000 ringgit, to not offer the same basic functions, it does not fly with most Malaysians anymore. That is the one thing that I really wish Mercedes-Benz Malaysia would listen to. Malaysian car buyers more and more are becoming more selective, more sensitive to safety features. And just look at Volvo. Pretty much its entire range is a full suite of active safety systems, and its numbers are soaring. It's selling more cars by the month. And I'm sure part of it is because of its superior safety systems. So I think it's about time for Mercedes-Benz Malaysia, and of course BMW even, to adapt to the new way of selling cars in Malaysia. So that's our full detailed review of the all-new W206 Mercedes-Benz C-Class here in Malaysia. As you can see in this video, this is a huge, massive step up for the C-Class, handily improving on all the shortcomings of the W205, especially the ride quality. So answering our earlier questions, for those of you upgrading from older C-Classes or even an A-Class, this will be a massive upgrade for you. At the same time, compared to the BMW 3 Series, this I think looks a little bit better, while the interior is far fancier, flashier, that in looks and feels, it makes the 3 Series look at least a generation behind. But of course, those of you who are looking for the best handling car for the class should still look at the BMW. For the rest of us, this is now the much better all-rounder. In short, the C-Class is right at the top of the class again. So what do you think of this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching everyone, and stay safe. This review is brought to you by Petronas Premix 97 with ProRace, power to move beyond.